Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mining for Meaning, Part 4. Today, we're going to take a strange tack and read a short story written by Forrest. It's called The Big Bang, and it addresses one of the biggest questions we as humanity have for the universe. Namely, where did the universe come from? Traditionally, you have two different options, right? You have the creationist theory of God or a God creating everything, or you have the scientific theory of the Big Bang, a single singularity that exploded out and created all matter and eventually life. What Forrest has done is taken a third option. It is set somewhere in the distant future based on the reading. You can imagine billions of years probably in the future when humanity has stretched itself out across the universe. And it's a very interesting theory dealing with paradox and science fiction. And so, I'm going to read that to you while we play, and I hope you enjoy. It is kind of short, so this session will be short as well. But The Big Bang by Forrest. The old man stared out the porthole from his cushioned seat within his quarters. For the first time in his life, there was nothing out there to see. No planets obscuring the cosmos, no ships careening back and forth across the void, not even the pinpricks of stars shining their light from across the infinite for all to see. Just blackness. He found it strangely comforting, in its own way, that there might be somewhere left in the entire universe where nothing existed, a place unspoiled by humanity. For billions of years, mankind had followed its manifest destiny, spread across the long-lost planet of Earth, then out into the solar system, the galaxy, the universe. Like a parasite, the old man muttered to himself, taking every resource, strip mining entire solar systems, and always breeding, until there was nothing left. Mankind had survived everything the universe had thrown at them, except themselves. 3 quick chimes from the door interrupted the old man's musings. "Enter," he commanded. The door slid open to reveal a young woman, or at least young in comparison to him. "We'll arrive in 5 minutes, Captain," she informed him. Captain Frank Rowland of the scientific research vessel the USS Odello smiled. "Thank you, Lieutenant Carter. I'll be right out." She hesitated a moment in the doorway. "Sir," she said tentatively, "there's something else you should know. It seems we've lost contact with Central Command." Good, he thought. "Understood," he said aloud. When the door slid shut behind her, Captain Rowland laughed to himself. This truly was a place of serenity. Not just the lights of the stars, but contact with the rest of the universe was gone as well. He'd grown tired of the endless updates on the war years ago, long before even his second retirement. If it hadn't been for the allure of this mission, he would have dug a hole to put himself in years ago. When resources began to run thin, and when it became apparent that humanity would continue to increase in number, mankind did what it always did. It went to war with itself. No one knows how many sides there were to begin with. Those records had been lost long ago. But in the end, only 2 sides remained, each vying for control of what little supplies the universe still had left. The ultimate civil war, the captain mused. He could feel his bones scraping against each other as he rose from his chair, and a laugh began bubbling up inside of him. Who did he think he was, taking on another mission at his age? At nearly 150 years, a man should know when to slow down. His back cracked as he rose to his full height. Reputation must be maintained, he figured, heading out of his private quarters. A hush had fallen across the bridge as the engines began to slow the ship. Even the mandatory captain on the bridge seemed to fall flat in the near silence. Out the main view screen was the same image from the porthole. Absolutely nothing. Even calling the space black seemed contradictory, as it seemed as though blackness itself was as bright as a noonday sun compared to this emptiness. Even though there was no motion, the crew seemed to almost stagger as the ship came to a dead stop. "Are we sure this is it?" Captain Rowland asked reverently. A man at the console replied, "It is as far as the computer is concerned." Captain Rowland settled into his chair. It's almost too much to believe, he mused. The center of the universe. What few crew members had looked away from the view screen turned back towards it. Think about it, the captain declared, his voice rising with emotion. This is it. This is the spot where all matter in the universe originated, where the Big Bang occurred, where God looked out across the void and decided there should be life. From this very spot, the boundaries of reality began their expansion, where suns and rocks and black holes and planets were born, where the molecules of everything, this ship, the place of your births, you, yourselves, were created. 5, 10, 15 minutes passed in utter silence. But eventually, even in the presence of the most extraordinary events, curiosity transformed into fidgeting, to boredom. What now? An ensign asked from his workstation. Captain Roland laughed in front of his crew for the first time since he joined the ship 5 years ago, his eyes glued to the screen. Now we run every scan we can on the area, check everything, thermal, spectral, chemical, hell, even check for temporal. Now that we're here, we aren't going anywhere until there isn't a single thing left to check. As his crew went to work, Captain Roland found himself lost in his own thoughts. Something had drawn him here, something he couldn't explain. He'd spent his whole life running from one place to the next, fighting the good fight however he could. Yet no matter where he went, he could always feel the subtle pull of this spot. And now that he was here, now he just felt anxious. Like there was something he was supposed to do, but he didn't know what it was. Captain, the ensign called out tentatively, you should see this. Roland tore his eyes away from the emptiness and pressed a sequence of buttons in his chair. A holographic screen jumped to life in front of him, displaying the ensign's terminal. What am I looking at? He asked. I don't see anything. That's exactly my point, sir, the ensign replied. There's nothing here. According to the scans, this whole place shouldn't even exist. Even the deepest reaches of space have some kind of molecule flowing through it, even if it's just light waves. But there's nothing here. Even our own lights are somehow being subdued. Gravity? Lieutenant Carter asked, a miniature version of the terminal in front of her own face. Are we in a black hole of some kind? No, the ensign responded. If anything, there's some form of anti-gravity here. The stabilizers are fighting like crazy to keep us here. The captain's thoughts had wandered while they talked, the mystery of this place seeming to flood his mind. We could do it, he said to himself. We could actually do it. Do what, Captain? Lieutenant Carter asked. He hadn't meant to speak out loud. With just a few switches and buttons, the captain explained, we could activate the temporal drive. We could travel back through time to the very beginning, settle the debate. Who is right? Science? Religion? What's the true origin of the universe? A deep silence filled the room as every wide eye turned towards the captain. That's forbidden, Lieutenant Carter snapped, and you know it. No one who has ever attempted it has returned. I know, the captain replied. I was just lost for a moment. You're right, of course. He shook himself as if trying to wake up. What have the scans revealed? Nothing so far, sir, the ensign replied, shaken. It's almost as if this part of space is reflecting our scans back at us, like the weight of the entire universe is pushing back against our attempts to see anything. We'll keep scanning. There's got to be... The ship suddenly rocked as if something had collided into it. Red lights flared to life and sirens blazed. An Elegani ship has appeared, Captain, the ensign screamed. It's opened fire. Shields, Captain Roland ordered, his voice booming over the sirens. Why didn't we see it coming? It's this area, Lieutenant Carter replied. Just like all other scans, our systems couldn't detect the ship until it was right on top of us. What do we do? The ensign cried out. This is a science vessel, not a warship. The Odello shook again as the enemy ship launched a second missile. Crew members called out damage reports. Main engines down, sir. Life support still holding. Decks 34 through 37 have received structural damage. Emergency force fields are holding. Captain Roland pulled a hidden lever out of his chair, and suddenly all of the ship's controls were in his hand. The blackness outside of the view screen spun as he flipped the science vessel around. Against the dark backdrop, a small vessel leapt into view. It was small and heavily damaged, but the fact its weapons were still available was readily apparent as a third missile sped away from it toward the Odello. With a casual flick of one of the captain's fingers, flares shot out across the empty space to intercept the oncoming missile. Despite the lack of atmosphere, the missile exploded in a shower of sparks and purple flames. Roland took a deep breath, let it out halfway, then pulled a trigger. A beam of green energy sliced through the dark at the speed of light, cutting through a portion of the Nelegani ship. A moment of calm settled over the bridge. "They've lost weapons and engines," the ensign reported. The enemy ship shuddered in the emptiness as orange explosions erupted out of its sides. "They've just lost life support. They'll be dead in the air in minutes." "What did you do?" "This is a science vessel," the captain replied, "but our war has been raging for centuries. Did you really think we didn't have any teeth?" The Nelegani ship was drifting toward the Odello slowly, its inertia continuing its forward motion. "Get a security team down to Cargo Base 6, the captain ordered. "Are you sure about that, Captain?" Lieutenant Carter inquired. "They're the enemy. Why not just let them go?" The captain's eyes drifted back to the view screen, the one place in the universe untainted by human hands, if for no other reason than because there was nothing here to scavenge. At least, not until today. As the red lights and sirens faded, Captain Roland returned the lever to its hidden compartment. "Activate the tractor beam," he declared, slowly getting to his feet. "Let's see why they're here, of all places." By the time the captain and the lieutenant had reached the cargo bay, the Nelegani ship had been secured, its crew on their knees with their hands bound and with weapons at their heads. They weren't dressed in military uniform, which was odd. In fact, they were barely dressed at all, and sweat still clung to their bodies with a sickly smell, almost as if they'd been traveling through a sauna rather than the emptiness of space. It was easy to figure out who the captain of their vessel was, however. She was the woman with fire in her eyes and venom practically dripping from her words. "You're too late. If we can't have it, neither can you." As if on cue, the crew of the Nelegani ship began to convulse on the ground, and red foam dribbled from their mouths. "Get away from them," Lieutenant Carter snapped at the guards. "They've taken some kind of poison." The guards leapt back as one, and the bodies on the floor began to dissolve. "What the hell did that mean?" Captain Roland demanded. "What else was on their ship?" One of the guards snapped his fingers, and the others ran into the ship. When they emerged, they carried a strange metal sphere between them. The sphere was roughly 6 feet in diameter and was made from some kind of reflective material that displayed the cargo bay in reverse. With the exception of one small indent in which a button and a display screen were held, the sphere was completely smooth. Yet when the guards set it down, the device stayed in place, despite the occasional rumbles of the heavily damaged engines. "Just this," the head of security replied. "As far as we can tell, there's nothing else in the entire ship beyond basic controls. They didn't even have food on board." "As if they weren't planning on returning," Captain Roland mused, glancing down at the dissolving piles of red goo. The captain and the lieutenant approached the sphere and glanced at the small display screen. The button, green and about the size of the captain's palm, had been fully depressed into the display. On the screen itself was a timer counting down from 20 minutes. "Stasis field," Lieutenant Carter snapped, pulling the captain back as she jumped away from the screen. Blue cones of light emanated from the walls, closing over the sphere. The lights designed to hold an object in perpetual stasis flickered once, twice, and then went out. "What the hell?" she demanded. Captain Roland closed his eyes. "All right," he said after a few precious seconds ticked away. "Let's think. Nelegani's ship enters the center of the universe. They have a damaged ship, no supplies, suicide packets hidden in their mouths, and what I can only assume is a bomb with some kind of anti-stasis field, which shouldn't even be possible." "We should jettison the bomb," Lieutenant Carter replied. "Get it off this ship. Maybe the vacuum of space will keep it from doing anything." Captain Roland smiled. "If space were enough to stop it, this is about the worst place to take it." He walked over to a control panel on the door. "Bridge, scan the computers of the captured ship. Look for anything mentioning a bomb or a metal sphere. Have the results ready by the time I get up there." The captain, with a youthful energy he hadn't felt in decades, ran toward the elevators, the doors closing behind him just as Lieutenant Carter slipped in. "Why aren't you having them scan the bomb?" she asked. Have you seen that kind of metal before? He asked. Because I haven't. If it can stop a stasis field, it can probably stop a scan as well. But the computers of their ship might have some kind of information. The doors snapped open to the bridge and the two exited in a hurry, rushing to their places. What have you found? Roland demanded. Nothing that makes sense, the ensign replied, his eyes on the screen. According to this, it's not just a bomb, it's the bomb, designed to cascade through the entire universe. Designed to what? Lieutenant Carter asked. If the calculations the Neligani made are correct, this bomb has so much energy that it will literally grow in power as it expands and interacts with the matter of the universe. His voice had grown shaky by the end. So that's what she meant, Captain Rowland stated softly. It's an end game. If the Neligani can't have the universe, then no one can. The ultimate murder-suicide. That's why they didn't carry any supplies. They wouldn't need it. Just get to the center of the universe, activate the bomb, and kill themselves before the blast atomizes them. He shook himself again. He was having trouble keeping his mind from wandering. How do we turn it off? The ensign was silent, and his screen went black. We can't, he replied after a moment. It doesn't have an off switch. I had the computer go ahead and scan the sphere while we were downloading the ship's computers. The metal is something even our systems have never seen before. Our computer estimates it will take 40 minutes just to cut a hole big enough to access its wiring. And even then, who knows how long it would take to deactivate. Captain Rowland looked back into the center of the universe. From here, even with the ship fighting to stay in place, he could feel the weight of reality pushing on him. All of creation expanded out and away from him, flowing and pulsing out, creating new planets, new miracles, new pains. Abandoned ship, he stated, his eyes closed. Captain? Lieutenant Carter asked. Do you have any idea how long that would take? To collect all the samples, gather everyone in place, load the escape pods and survey ships? Forget the samples, Roland snapped. Abandon ship, now. He pressed a series of controls on his chair. Yellow lights erupted all across the ship, and a woman's voice began ordering the crew members to follow their evacuation routes. Sir, Lieutenant Carter protested. This ship has been active for 500 years. We have samples, experiments, and documentation from every corner of the universe. We can't leave it all behind. You have your orders, Lieutenant, Captain Rowland snapped. Everyone, get off the ship now. The bridge emptied, with the lieutenant the last to leave. The captain, however, remained in his seat. The view screen split in half in front of him. On the left, he saw the sphere with its countdown. On the right, the empty blackness that was slowly being filled with escape pods and small ships. The pods were slow, but left the occupants in a stasis field of their own. They also emitted an emergency beacon that would be picked up once the pods got back into regular space. The small ships were faster, but it would still take years to get into contact with Central Command. 10 minutes, the display declared. The captain moved slowly, guiding his hands through a sequence of motions of muscle memory. A small screen appeared in front of him. Temporal drive. Enter destination year. The elevator door hissed open. When are you planning on going? Lieutenant Carter asked as she stepped onto the bridge. I don't know, Captain Rowland replied. He didn't seem surprised that she disobeyed a direct order to evacuate. If we go into the future, we're just delaying the inevitable. We'll reappear, the bomb will go off, and reality will be destroyed. We'd just be giving the universe a longer countdown. But if we go into the past, we destroy everything early, she pointed out, sitting down on the floor. And we can't just jump into the time stream, he laughed. I can't even imagine what that would do to the universe. Maybe nothing, maybe destroy time, maybe send bursts of destruction at random intervals throughout all time. He continued to stare at the screen in front of him. Damned no matter what decision I make. Then go to the start, she told him. Let's see who was right, science or religion. Captain Rowland chuckled. If religion is right, this will give God one hell of a surprise, he told her, and inputted the number 0, and then hit execute. The right-hand side of the view screen burst into a flood of colors. Streaks of light in every imaginable hue, as well as a few with no names, flew by as the ship slipped into the time stream and traveled backwards. The captain and the lieutenant seemed frozen in place as the colors streamed by, and even through the ship. The timer on the sphere, however, continued to count down. By the time the ship shot out of time, the number had dropped to 4 minutes 38 seconds. The captain's heart felt like it was about to burst. This was it. A time before the universe. Before time. The forbidden moment in history. "Where is it?" he demanded, turning the ship so that the view screen could take in everything. Or, to be more accurate, so it could take in nothing. "The singularity," he continued. "It should be here somewhere. There should be so much gravity that we should have been crushed into nothing the instant we arrived." His voice took on a panicked tone. Before activating the system, he could feel the weight of the universe all around him. But here, that presence was gone. For the first time ever, there was simply nothing. "I don't know," Lieutenant Carter replied. She stood and walked up to the view screen, as if standing closer would allow her to see something new. "Maybe religion really is right, and God will appear in the next few seconds to kickstart everything." Frank Rowland laughed and tossed his captain's badge to the ground. "The greatest question in the universe," he declared. "God or science? What created the universe? Well, here we are, and what is there? Nothing." His voice had turned bitter. "Why didn't you order me to leave when I came back?" Lieutenant Carter asked, her eyes still scanning the nothingness in front of her. "Would you have listened if I did?" "No." "Then why waste what little time we had debating it?" he finished. The timer was down to the last minute. Lieutenant Carter turned to look at the captain, and her eyes widened. She'd never really noticed before, but the man was old. Not just old like her parents had been when they'd retired, but old in a way that she'd only seen in literature. At some point, he'd let himself go a bit. His hair and beard were both long, which was definitely against regulation, and as white as snow. But there was still a spark in his eyes, still a hint of energy and youthfulness that most people lost long before they reached his age. And, she realized, he looked familiar. Not just from the years she'd spent working with him, but from something else entirely. Something from deep within. "There's a third option you haven't considered," she told him softly. "To what?" he asked. "God or science," she replied. "Those aren't the only two options available." "Oh," he laughed. "And what's through curtain number 3? "Temporal paradox," she replied. "No universe without mankind, no mankind without the universe, tied together by a pair of fools in a time machine in an endless loop." "What are you talking about?" he demanded. She laughed and let her hair down. "You know, there are some areas where you can be truly thick." She continued to look at him as if seeing him for the first time. "They're going to remember you," she told him. "Who is?" the captain reported, waving his hand at the view screen. "God? Our numerous audience members?" She smiled. "Everyone," she finally stated, turning back to the screen. Time was almost out. "In a few billion years, as life begins to crawl out of the primordial ooze, it'll be your face they see. You'll be remembered, worshipped, venerated. But me? It'll take them longer to remember me." "Did you hit your head?" Roland asked. He had no idea what she was talking about. Lieutenant Carter turned back to look at the captain as the final few seconds counted down on the universe-destroying bomb. "It's quite simple," she told him. "Just 4 words." "What words?" he asked, his curiosity finally kicking in. "Let there be light," she replied. The timer hit 0. The bomb went off. Infinite energy burst out from Cargo Base 6, vaporizing the ship in a literal instant. Metals and materials, the 2 crew members, the plant and animal samples from all corners of the universe, all engulfed in an expanding sphere of energy so pure and so fast that even light was left behind. But the bomb was designed to destroy, to encounter a complete universe and break it down, with each planet and star erased, slowing down the expansion. However, here at the beginning of time, with nothing in its way, the sphere of energy continued to expand without resistance. In time, though, even energy begins to cool, turns into light, into matter, into dust. And ingrained in each molecule is a single image. An old man at his chair, his white hair and beard long, his eyes staring out into the universe, waiting for creation to begin. I hope you enjoyed this Mining for Meaning and that you actually take something from this story. Are there only two options? Or are we trapped in an infinite loop with somebody in the distant future going back and restarting the universe every time it's almost destroyed? With that, I will leave you with your thoughts, and we'll see you next time on Mining for Meaning.